Next week's training camp, first preseason games in 11 days, regular season starts in 29 days. Are we really going into the season with Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen as the Sabres' backup goalie? We'll explore it coming up on the Locked On Sabres podcast.
Your Locked On Sabres, your daily podcast on the Buffalo Sabres. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And thanks for making Locked On Sabres your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Sabres Prospects Challenge is coming up in just a couple of days, so stay tuned for some thoughts on that here on the Locked On Sabres podcast, and I'll be watching from Florida. I've got a trip coming up this weekend, but I'll be back in town on Monday, and I'll be looking forward to getting connected with fans and going through what happened, because there's 3 games between now and then and a lot of good Sabres prospects on the way. We are really getting close. 11 days from the first preseason game here on Wednesday. We are 29 days away, Jason Pominville number of days away, from the start of the Sabres season. So it's all coming up at Sticky Joe Sports. If you want to follow me on Twitter, you can check out the show on our YouTube channel as well, where we always appreciate looking through some comments, Twitter or YouTube. In fact, I meant to look and didn't. Let's take a quick peek if we got anything worth reading from the listeners on our latest episode. If you missed it, on the Sabres roster for the Prospects Challenge, which is loaded. 5 former first-round picks and plenty of other very interesting prospects. I forgot. I pointed out the Jim Lorenz jersey on the show, so everyone's sharing their jerseys. Love that. Chris has got a Jason Pominville captain jersey. James got a LaFontaine captain jersey, a Dahlin home jersey, and just ordered a red and black Thompson jersey. Love that. You got to have a black and red. You got to have at least one black and red in the arsenal ready to go on a black and red night, because the blue and gold jersey is great. I'll probably wear this Jim Lorenz jersey to, I'm sure, a black and red game at some point. But it's cool. It'd be cool if the whole crowd was like in the black and red jersey. It would look better on TV too. The double has a Power Road and an Eichel 2020 reverse retro. Yeah, a lot of Eichel jerseys still rolling around out there. So excited for the season. Again, we're getting really close. And I had a thought about the Sabres and the position group that they haven't addressed during the offseason. And the offseason is almost over. The number one thing we're all waiting for before they arrive at camp, and players are now in Buffalo, Instagram, Twitter, if you follow them on social media, a lot of the Sabre players were actually at the Bison's game on Tuesday. Dahlin was one of those, Thompson as well, but a bunch of Sabres are in town now as camp is just about to get going. Dahlin's the guy that we're all focusing on. Will he sign before camp begins? I've assumed yes. We'll see. Not worried about it if he doesn't, but it's something that we're monitoring and interested in to see what that number ends up being. Another thing that I think has become accepted that it's not going to happen is something I've waited for all off season. And while I'm not holding my breath that it will happen, I'm not also completely closed to the fact that it could still happen as well. And that is the Sabres doing something in goal next to Devon Levi. So that's where I want to focus on today's show. What is still out there, whether that's free agency, whether that's guys in the trade market, and let's really look at the internal options, because the most likely outcome by a lot right now is that there is a camp battle coming. Football is a big camp battle sport, right? Like, you got a 53-man roster, you got special teams, you got backup jobs, starting jobs. Camp battle is a football thing. Hockey, here with the Sabres this year, there is a camp battle coming for backup goaltender between Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen and Eric Comrie. The Sabres, between Kevin Adams and Don Granato, have both talked extensively about why it's not really that convenient to have 3 goaltenders. Practice time, minute time in games. Practice really was the number one reason why. So I don't think the Sabres will carry 3 goaltenders, which means Luukkonen versus Comrie is on the way at training camp. Let's look at the internal options first and start with Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen. The reason, by the way, that I had the thought to talk about goaltending today is because I heard Luukkonen on Sabres Live with Brian Duff and Marty Baran. And he is also coming back over. He spent the summer, of course, over in Finland and in Europe, did some golf trips, he said, with Henri Jokiharju. Are we really going into the year with Luukkonen as the backup to Devon Levi or the 1B to Devon Levi, whatever, the other NHL goaltender, the guy to be paired with a rookie and Devon Levi is another guy that is completely unproven and to me is not conducive to a playoff run, a playoff caliber team when your other goalie again is a young rookie goaltender. So Luukkonen, we're 46 games in to his NHL career, and even more than that with his pro hockey career because of all the games that he's played in Rochester, which is not a huge number. In fact, I think it's only 35. 35 is the number for Luukkonen. 34, actually, is the number for Luukkonen in Rochester. In fact, he's played more in the NHL at this point. And what has he done in the NHL? Well, not a whole lot. 49th out of 75, Luukkonen was in the 2022-23 season in goals saved above expected. The fancy stats, if you will, but that is my go-to for looking at how a guy does in goal, because it's a very team-specific position, what types of chances you get, slot chances against, power play time, and whatnot. Luukkonen, remember, won Rookie of the Month in the NHL in the month of January. So the narrative and the talk about Luukkonen has always been, well, he had that one stretch. And in some ways, he did. But in reality, he was only seen as being good in that stretch because he was winning games. But the Sabres were scoring crazy goal totals when he won Rookie of the Month. Luukkonen in the month of January was 6-2-1. That was the month he won Rookie of the Year, Rookie of the Month, a .907 save percentage. In fact, if you want to expand that to December, he went 6-2 with a .908 save percentage. So between those 2 months, he went 12-4-1, a great record, but a .907 save percentage. Look at the goals scored by the Sabres in Luukkonen starts from December into January. Luukkonen gave up. You know what? I thought this was going to be easy to find right in front of me, but it's not. But here we go. Luukkonen, the Sabres scored 4 against Colorado when Luukkonen was in goal. Against Vegas, the Sabres scored 3, and that was in a win. Against Boston on New Year's Eve, that went to overtime, the Sabres scored 4 goals. How about when they went to Washington in early January and Luukkonen won that game? The Sabres won 5-4. Really, the better way to look at this, I could do it quicker. Look at the goals allowed in Luukkonen victories from December to January. 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 3, 4, 5, 3, 2, 3, 3. There were all at least 3, except a couple. He was not great. He was fine. And you know what? If he can maintain that level of play, that might be acceptable. That's decent backup production. That's what that is. To me, that is decent backup production. You will need your team to score goals when he is in there. You'll hear timely saves a lot when it comes to Luukkonen. Here's where we're at, though. I think he's going to be the backup. Kevin Adams told a story about Luukkonen coming over to his house and, having dinner or whatnot and talking about his career and getting to know him better. And I'm not as much interested in the story itself as much as I am about when Kevin Adams decided to tell that story. He waited till the off season. And that to me says maybe he was poking around the market, didn't like what he saw, went, okay, Luukkonen is my best idea. Let me show everybody how committed I am now to Luukkonen, when maybe he wouldn't have been for a time because, hey, at the end of the year, I told you I thought he might never play for the Sabres again or wouldn't be the backup goaltender because the Sabres phased him out. Levi was the guy, And as much as they showed how much they trust Devon Levi at the end of the year, they also showed how much they don't trust Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen. Levi had to play back-to-back nights at the end of the year because they didn't trust Luukkonen. So that's where we're at with him. I think he's going to be the goalie, but I think it's because he's the best option of what Adams thinks is a bunch of bad options. That's the way I take it. So my betting favorite to be the Sabres' number 2 goalie is Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen. Could it work? You have to give some probability that it can. I would not bet on it working. I think if Luukkonen plays the year as the number 2 to Devon Levi, we're going to get halfway through the year, and everyone's going to be screaming for a different goaltender. Whether they do it or not, who knows? But I think fans will want a different goalie if Luukkonen goes through the year as the number 2. Could it work, though? Yes. He was really good in the OHL for Sudbury, had a couple of major surgeries since then. He's still only 24 years old, which is very young for a goaltender. Goalies often don't hit their prime until 27, even 28 years old. Linus Ullmark is a prime example of that. It happens. It does happen sometimes. I'm just not seeing enough evidence to point to it's going to. It might, but I think you're on a hope and a prayer that Luukkonen will get a lot better this year. Luukkonen's not the only internal option. Eric Comrie is still under contract. Is it realistic that he could wrestle that job away from UPL? We'll go through that when we come back here on the Locked On Sabres podcast. We are presented by FanDuel Sportsbook. Hockey bets are coming. You got futures available to you right now, but of course the NHL season is not too far off, less than a month away, but it is football time right now. Football season has kicked off, and FanDuel is giving you the chance to win all season long, because right now, when you bet on the Super Bowl winner, I love this promo. When you bet on the Super Bowl winner, you get bonus bets every time they win in the regular season. And those are the best type of bets. You bet on a team, and that's your team for the year. You know, you might be a Bills fan. So, okay, fine. You got your Bills fandom. Go pick an NFC team. Like Detroit is a team that I'm rooting for this year. I'm going to go bet on Detroit. And now, hey, every time they win, I've got a rooting interest. Every time they play, I've got a rooting interest. And it's really a way to sink your teeth into a second team if you've already got a favorite. Again, bonus bets every time that team wins in the regular season. Just pick any team to win the Super Bowl, and you get those bonus bets for every victory. And then you can use those bonus bets on the spreads, player props, over-unders. If you want to throw a little on that Buffalo hockey Stanley Cup future, you can do that as well. So visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn. Start earning bonus bets with America's #1 sportsbook. That's FanDuel.com/LockedOn. Sneaky Joe DiBiase here on the Locked On Sabres podcast. Thanks for making me your first listen every day. Goalies. All right, Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen. That's the number 1 option. By the way, follow up on Luukkonen. Remember, he cannot be waived. He's played too many games. He's played in the league long enough. He cannot be waived. It is Buffalo or bust for Luukkonen. He will not be in Rochester, save for the chance he clears waivers, but I would be very surprised if Luukkonen cleared waivers. He's not the only goalie on the Sabres. Eric Comrie is still under contract. Eric Comrie could also be an idea for the Sabres at backup goaltender. And you know what? The further away we get from last season, the more I want to be open to Comrie being a better option than Luukkonen. I don't know if I want to dive full in on that take yet, but I'm warming up to the idea that Comrie really should be the Sabres' backup goalie. And maybe, again, that's just because so much time has passed since I do remember when he allowed 10 goals in one game. And I said after he allowed 10 goals in one game, I never want to see him in a Sabres uniform again. I've settled down since then, a little bit. Maybe he is a decent idea. Eric Comrie entering year 2 with the Buffalo Sabres. What did year 1 look like? 19 games played, an .886 save percentage, a 9-9-1 record. I mean, the record wasn't horrible, but again, the Sabres won so many games by scoring 1 billion goals. Last year, goals saved above expected. I told you that Luukkonen was 49th out of 75. Well, Comrie was 66th out of 75. There were fewer than 10 goalies that were worse than him last year. The year before, though, And this is why the Sabres signed him in the first place. He was seen as an analytics signing, that there were analytical reasons to think this guy's got more to give. He started 19 games last year and was 66th, right? The year before in Winnipeg, this is again, we talked about this when they signed him. The year before in Winnipeg, out of 67 goalies that qualified in 2021-22, goal saved above expected, Eric Comrie ranked second. The only goalie better than him in the minutes per minute played was Igor Shesterkin of the Rangers. That was it in 19 games played, same amount of games that he played last year. So, all right, what's the argument for Comrie? Well, the argument for Comrie is last year is just a lost year. Last year, he started the season and wasn't terrible at the beginning of the year. If you look at his splits from last year, he certainly was better in the beginning portion of last year than he was at the end. In October, started 6 games, went 3-3, had a .902 save percentage. Not better than Luukkonen's best month. I will point that out. And then he got hurt. November happened too. In November, he wasn't good either. And then he got hurt. And maybe that is something worth giving a bit of a pass for. He almost played enough games before that to where you don't want to give him a complete pass, but maybe a partial pass, because Comrie got hurt and maybe he was never right the rest of the way. He was horrific after he came back from injury. So it would make sense to me that, yeah, he was affected by something last year. A bet on Comrie is a bet on, hey, last year was just a wash year, a fluky year. Goalies have up and down seasons all the time. Right? Marc-Andre Fleury has horrible seasons and then comes back and is great the next year. And I know Eric Comrie's not Marc-Andre Fleury. You don't have to tell me that twice. But this guy has done something Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen has not. In limited action, both guys are limited. Neither's played a big stretch of games ever. But between the two, Comrie's had 1 year where he was actually really good. Luukkonen's never had that. Luukkonen's not done that in the NHL. He's not even done that in the AHL. If I count AHL numbers, Luukkonen hasn't done that. Once turning pro, and Comrie, remember, way back in the day with Winnipeg, was a top prospect as well, second-round pick. Their top goalie prospect for a time. He's been better in the AHL, and he has 1 good year in the NHL. Luukkonen has not been good in the AHL and does not have 1 good year in the NHL. All right. So maybe Comrie? I'm talking myself into it a little bit. I don't love the idea. I think there are better options out there, and I would be very quick to pull you've been on a very tight leash if it were me with Comrie. And maybe the Sabres start the year with 3 goalies. I know that I've said they don't want to. I don't believe they will. But maybe they feel like they have to because they're going to give both these guys an opportunity in the regular season to earn the job. But training camp battle is coming. I think Luukkonen is the favorite going in, and Comrie is the one that's going to have to wrestle the job away from him. But I don't want to say it's impossible. In fact, I'd give a decent shot at Comrie wrestling the job away from Luukkonen, maybe like 25 to 30%. But at the end of the day, I do think it will be Luukkonen. When we come back, are there any ideas left out there? Trade, free agency, is there anything left to be done? There are some big names, there are some smaller names. We'll get to a couple of those when we come back here on the Locked On Sabres podcast. We are presented by Jase Medical. You know, Jase Medical, everyone should be empowered to care for themselves and their loved ones during the unexpected, and that is why Jase Medical offers the Jase case. The Jase case provides 5 life-saving antibiotics for emergency use. It gives you a peace of mind so that you are not just hoping that you have access to medication in an emergency. Jase Medical ensures, make sure you have the medication on hand. Jase Medical is simple. They handle everything from the online evaluation to licensed pharmacy medication delivery and ongoing consultation and care. Don't get caught unprepared. Save more than $360 by getting these life-saving antibiotics with Jase Medical, plus an additional $20 off by using the promo code LOCKEDON at checkout on jasemedical.com. That's JASE medical.com. Promo code LOCKEDON. Final segment here on the Locked On Sabres podcast. If you have any thoughts on today's episode or anything that we're talking about goaltender-wise, feel free, hit me up on Twitter at Sneaky Joe Sports, at Locked On Sabres, or on our YouTube channel in the comment section. What's left out there for the Sabres to make a move? They want to make one at the 11th hour. Here's where I'm not going to eliminate the possibility that they do that. there's a lot that needs to happen in that. A lot that has to happen in goal. In fact, I would say there's one free agent out there that I think will still sign somewhere, and 3 guys that I still would lean towards predicting will be traded. Let's start with the free agent. The free agent name that is still out there is actually kind of a former Sabre. You'll know who I'm talking about if you get my drift here. Jaroslav Halak is still available. Now, you might have forgot Halak is even still in the league because, yes, he's old. 38 years old. Basically, what the Sabres would be doing by signing Jaroslav Halak is turning the clock back 2 years on signing Craig Anderson. If you think signing Craig Anderson for 2 years was a success, this is basically that all over again. Halak is older and can't play a big workload, but look at his past couple of years. Last year, playing 25 games for the New York Rangers, expected goals saved above expected. Out of 75 goalies, he ranked 32nd. Year before that, he ranked 33rd. The exact 903 save percentage each of the last 2 years. He has been at a steady backup pace for each of the last 3 years. And the 3 years before that, he was at a starter's pace. When he was 32 through 34, starter's pace. Since he hit 35, he's been at a pretty reliable backup pace. And I think you could still rely on him to be a solid backup. Well, why is he still available? I think there's a good answer to that question, and it might be one the Sabres don't want to bring him in for. Halak, on each of his last 2 contracts, has received a full no movement clause. And I have to believe that's important to him as he's pushed for it, even when he was the backup. And I imagine that's the reason why he's still unsigned is he, again, for a third time, wants a full no movement clause. Well, you might be thinking, okay, well, that's fine. Give him the full no movement clause because I'm competing for a playoff spot anyway, and I'm not going to want to trade him. It's not just trading him. If he's bad and you want to call somebody else up, maybe you snuck Luukkonen somehow to Rochester, or maybe Comrie's down there, or maybe you want to do something else. You want to replace him at any point during the year because it's not going well and he's hit that age cliff, you can't do anything. You can't, not only can you not trade him, you can't send him down to Rochester. You can't waive him to be picked up by somebody else. You have to, the ball's in his court. He could do whatever he wants. Now, maybe he'd just retire. Maybe he'd help facilitate a trade somewhere else or a waiver claim somewhere else. But it wouldn't be up to you. And that is a little bit of a scary proposition, I think, to signing him. So that's why he's not available. But he is certainly the best name available that can be had for a contract and not be traded for. Big name still available on the trade market. On the TSN trade bait list, number 9 is John Gibson. He is still available. And Frank Saravelli reported during the offseason that Gibson told the Ducks he will never play for them again. Now, Gibson disputed that, and his agent disputed that. But as Saravelli pointed out, that agent has lied before about denying Saravelli reports, and then the Saravelli reports turned out to be true. I trust Saravelli in this instance, that Gibson will not play for the Ducks again. Or if he does start the year, he wants to be traded. He's told them that. And they're tanking. So they're at least still really bad. I don't know if they're outright tanking. I think Gibson will be moved eventually. I hate it for the Sabres. 4 years, $6.4 million. He's had a bunch of bad years in a row. He has been on bad teams, but I don't want to risk that he'll return to form under that contract. You know, at 4 years, $6.4 million, the Sabres cap situation, like, all right, if in a dream scenario, if the Ducks called me and say, hey, we got to get John Gibson out of here. He doesn't want to play here and we hate the contract. If I'm Kevin Adams, I answer the phone and go, all right, I'd take him. I'd put him on my roster and I'd play him 35 to 45 games and hope he returns to form. But I'm not giving you anything for him. Nothing. You're giving me something. You're giving me a second round pick. Or I'll give you a second and you give me a first. But that contract is an anchor. And I am not taking that off your hands unless I get something in return. And that doesn't sound like the position the Ducks are at. They're not at cap dump situations with John Gibson. If that changes for them, and I might think it will eventually, then we can have a conversation. Number 2 on the TSN trade bait list is Connor Hellebuyck. He's going to get traded. The Jets are not, he's made it clear, I think as much as he can, that he's not going to re-sign in Winnipeg. And the Jets, I don't think are going to lose him for nothing. Eventually, he will be traded. The good news, if you love the Connor Hellebuyck idea, and you love the Connor Hellebuyck idea that does not include signing into a long-term extension, every day that passes where Winnipeg doesn't trade him, the better the news is for the Sabres. Because if you think Levi, like most of us do, is going to be this team's number one goalie for a long time, well, you don't need Connor Hellebuck for 8 years. You only need him for 1 year. And for that 1 year, how can I beat one of the 3 best goalies in the world? Final year of his contract. The longer it goes, the more likely it is that Winnipeg will have to settle for selling him as a rental instead of selling him to a team that will sign him to a long-term deal. And Hellebuck had the balls in his court for that. He could make it known to everybody, hey, I want to get to free agency. That's all I want to do. I'll try my best this year for whoever I go to, but I would like to have an open market available to me after the year. That would be good news for the Sabres, because if Hellebuck makes it clear to everybody that I want to hit the open market, now Winnipeg's got to sell him as a rental. And now he's cheaper, and the Sabres can have that and not sign him. And that to me is why the longer the Hellebuck thing goes, the more of a realistic idea he becomes for the Buffalo Sabres. The last goalie that I think is going to be traded, but has not been traded yet, all along this has been my guy, and even to this point right now, this is the guy I would trade for. And I think this guy should be the Sabres goaltender next to Devon Levi. It's Thatcher Demko. It is, to me, like I can't say it enough. I've said it a lot. It's been a while since I said it, but I'll repeat what I've said in the past on Thatcher Demko. The guy fits everything for what the Sabres need. He's not so good like a Hellebuck that he makes Devon Levi irrelevant. He has the age you want at 27 years old. He has the history of being a reliable number 1 that you want, let alone a 1B, last year withstanding. But last year was an injury-plagued season for him, as many NHL executives talked about when he was getting votes as a top 10 goalie in the world at an ESPN poll, and the executives were saying, well, he was injured. You have to give him a pass for it. Before that, a really good starting goalie in 3 seasons, really 4 seasons in a row for Vancouver. Actually, it was 3 seasons in a row for Vancouver. Finally, why he makes the most sense. Connor Hellebuck has got a 1-year deal, and it's only for 1 year, and I've probably got to pay a ton to get him. John Gibson, that I don't have to pay a ton to get him probably, but I've got a stupid contract, 4 years, $6.4 million, and I don't know whether he'll return to form. Because for him, it's not one injury plague year like Demko. Gibson, it's like 3-4 bad years, and he's been healthy the whole time. Very different. Demko has 3 years left on his contract at $5 million per year. That is manageable on multiple fronts by the Buffalo Sabres. The term is not bad. It gets him to age 30. And then you can make a decision on what you want to do after that. $5 million, it's $1.5 million less than $6.5 million, and it's less than what Hellebuck gets as well. It's a manageable contract that they could stomach, and they could bring in a talented, reliable option next to Devon Levi. There is no doubt in my mind Thatcher Demko is the best idea for the Sabres. I do think he'll be traded too, because there were rumors last year. He's told the Canucks he wants to be traded. He says they're baseless. That's what you normally get in hockey. I like to believe those rumors when they come out, at least in the slightest, because they're more fun. Demko's the man. Other ideas, Carter Hart's out there. Capo Kakinen maybe in San Jose. I don't know. There's other guys that you could toss out. If you've got an idea, feel free to hit me up. But again, to kind of put a bow on all of this, even though Demko's my favorite idea, I would bet on Luukkonen opening the season as the man next to Devon Levi. Thanks for listening to the Locked On Sabres podcast. Be sure to watch this Prospects Challenge. Should be a fun time. And we'll recap it for you the next time we talk. Thanks for listening. This has been the Locked On Sabres podcast with Sneaky Joe DiBiase, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.